Hello and welcome to this week's TNC Oppo preview. We managed to find a Southampton fan. We did take the mickey about that on our podcast. And last time out, yes, we won a game of football. We, of course, won away at Brentford. And then 5 minutes later, Daniel Farke got the sack. Now, Dean Smith is in charge, and we are up against Southampton at Carrow Road. And who better to give us all the Saints insight than Steve Grant of Total Saints podcast, a regular on there. Steve, thanks so much, first of all, for sparing us your time. What's the mood like around St Mary's at the moment?
It's quite positive. I think there's still a little bit of sort of thought of, well, we've basically played all the rubbish teams in the last month, and that's why we've got our results. But we were playing quite well in the early part of the season as well, without getting the results we perhaps deserved. So I think, to be honest, we've basically had probably only 1.5 really bad games so far this season. So yeah, I think those that kind of try to take a little bit more of a balanced opinion on things, i.e. those who don't base themselves on sort of Twitter opinion, will kind of be reasonably satisfied with how things are shaping up. I think in terms of points on the board, we've done okay. The last month certainly we've been excellent. 10 points from 12. Should have been 12 really. We should have beaten Burnley as well. But we're looking all right. Looking up the table rather than down, I think.
Steve, I'm so jealous. And I said this to the Redmond fans as well. Yeah, it's all right, 10 points out of 12. I'll take it. Not bad. Absolutely brilliant, mate. I want to talk about your last game, Steve, actually, for a multitude of reasons. But first of all, just to talk about the result itself, it was a 1-0 win against Aston Villa. Although a very early goal, I believe it was in the 3rd minute, the game completely tailed off, and it was actually probably quite a cagey affair. Are you worried about how that will potentially impact your team's performance away at Carrow Road this Saturday?
No, I don't think so. I think partly that will be because we've had 2 weeks to prepare. And to be honest, we don't know what sort of state the players are coming back in. Those who have been away on international duty, it sounds as if there might be 1 or 2 injuries. So there may be a couple of enforced changes there anyway. But also I think we do generally sort of, I know it's a little bit of a cliche, but I do think that Ralph Hasenhüttl does try to kind of take the proverbial sort of 1 game at a time mantra and not dwell too much on things that have happened in the past and kind of get everything focused. That Villa game, should have been put to bed by half time. We should have been 3 or 4 nil up. They should have been down to 10 men after about 10 minutes or so. But second half was a little bit more ropey, but realistically Villa couldn't possibly play as badly as they did in the first half again. So I think only 1-0, and the problem has been that our 3 wins last month were all 1-0 wins against Leeds, Villa and Watford. Right. And all of them should have been a lot more comfortable, but we're still not quite as clinical in front of goal as we should be. Now whether that's a positive or a distinctly worrying sign for Norwich going into Saturday, I don't know. But eventually someone's going to be on the end of a hiding, and it's one of those cases. It's a case of which game is it going to be? Is it going to be one where we also don't do anything silly at the back, or is it going to be just one of those games where we end up in a 3-3 draw and everyone says, well, why couldn't we have scored those 3 goals in a winning performance?
Oh God, I really hope it's not. I really hope it's not against us, and I'm so worried because, of course, the narrative here and the very strange thing that's going to be for Southampton is you go and beat Dean Smith's Aston Villa, and now in the next game you're up against Dean Smith's Norwich City. Do you think that Dean Smith will potentially suss Southampton out because of the fact that he played you in the last game, or can you see him maybe sticking to the same style that he played with Villa against Southampton last time?
If he sticks with the same style that he started with, then you're in a whole world of trouble. Because they were dreadful, so bad. But ultimately, new manager coming into a fresh squad of players who are all going to be eager to impress. Probably a few players who are on the fringes who are particularly going to be looking at getting catching the manager's eye. So I think you're always slightly concerned as the supporter of a team going up against a manager's first game. But it's one of those where you've kind of got to play the occasion and not let because I mean Carrow Road, whenever we've gone there, I mean obviously apart from when it's behind closed doors, whenever we go there, it's always a good atmosphere until the game settles down one way or the other. If the game's going in the away team's favour, then obviously it'll go quiet and the game will be fairly comfortable. But when Norwich are in the ascendancy, then it's always a cracking atmosphere, and you do feel as if that's kind of helping the players to a huge degree. But I think it's one of those where if you make a bad start, then it's going to go flat very quickly. So I think that's what I would imagine we'll be saying in the build up to the game. Make a fast start, get on the front foot early. If we get a lead early, then we can manage it from there. And it's one of those where you probably think we might then go on and do it comfortably. But if we have a bad start, then I could easily see us screwing up completely.
Oh wow! Well, that's great news. Steve, how can Norwich hurt Southampton? Can we hurt you? Are there any weak areas in your team that you would like to expose to us today?
Poor finishing. So give us half chances rather than full chances.
Okay.
Which I know, looking at your goals against column, isn't necessarily your strong point. But I think defensively while we've kept, I think, 4 or 5 clean sheets this season, we've been a very Jekyll and Hyde side in defence. If we're good at the back, then we will keep a clean sheet and we'll look really solid. But it only takes one mistake, and all of a sudden we then look like the side that conceded 60-odd goals last season. So it's one of those things. How do we deal with it on the day? If we turn up and we're the good side, then I think probably the only obvious thing is kind of crosses from wide areas. If you can get into good positions behind the fullbacks, because both of them like to push on and attack, and quite often that can leave a little bit of space in behind.
Same. Join the club.
Yeah. I mean, that's a common problem for modern teams, because fullback positions are so important in the modern game. If you haven't got fullbacks that are capable and willing to get on the attack and get forward, then you kind of basically lose a huge amount of attacking possibility there. And we've kind of taken the approach of, well, actually that's our key area, really. I mean, we've had some incredible fullbacks over the last probably 10, 15 years.
Yeah, you have, absolutely have. I mean, I remember Ryan Bennett, who of course was on loan at Norwich City once upon a time. So I can certainly vouch for you on that front. It's interesting you should say wide areas, because that's where we can be hurt as well. But by the same token, there's lots of talk of Dean Smith potentially wanting to start Todd and Milo Rashica, who he wanted at Aston Villa. So that could potentially be an area that Norwich hurt you. Steve, who are the Southampton players that are getting you up off your seat at the moment? Who are the players that are in form coming into this one at Carrow
Road? Weirdly, I think it's our sort of probably our more conservative players. I think Oriol Romeo has been absolute class this season. He has been an absolute cut above, which has been handy, because I think James Ward-Prowse has been a little bit off his game, apart from against Villa the other week, where he was kind of back to his level. Tino Livramento's the standout, I would say. He's the one that's been catching the eye. Turned 19, I think, 2 days ago, but he's played every game this season so far. Wow. I mean, we got an absolute ridiculous deal for him from Chelsea. I think we've paid £5 million for him, and the buyback clause is 50 million.
Oh, is this the defender, Steve? Sorry.
So he's a new rate.
I've got him in the Premier League,
and
mate. So thanks for that. Cheers.
It's fairly incredible how, given how good Kyle Walker-Peters was for us last season,
Yes, I remember
that Walker-Peters doesn't now get a game in his best position. Whenever Walker-Peters plays, he has to play at left back.
Interesting.
So that kind of gives us a little bit of a lopsided feel to an extent, because Walker-Peters' left foot is not great. It's not particularly strong. He's working on it clearly, and you can kind of see game by game there's a little bit more coming from it. But he's a naturally right-footed player, and he's playing on the left at the moment because that's the only slot in the team for him.
Wow. Speaking of specific players, Steve, there is definitely one player that I really want to talk to you about in this podcast, which is, of course, former Norwich City player Nathan Redmond. I really just want you to talk to me about Nathan Redmond. Since you signed him, how has he developed as a player? And what's he been like in the last couple of seasons for Southampton? Because he was always one at Norwich where, and I'm sure, well, a lot of people will disagree with me in the comments. Some people will agree with me. I felt that Nathan Redmond was an excellent player in terms of getting forwards, bringing the ball forwards, but that end product wasn't quite there. He almost couldn't fulfill that latent potential at Norwich City. Has he fulfilled his potential at Southampton?
Bits and pieces, I would say. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, really, because he was good the first 2 years. Got player of the season 1 year, and looked as if he was basically the new sort of leader of the team after the likes of Mane and Tadic had moved on. I mean, I'll be honest, you can't replace someone like Dusan Tadic.
No.
Just an incredible player, and for us to have effectively given him away to Ajax was probably the worst bit of business we've ever done, and we've done some pretty poor business in the last few years transfer wise. But Redmond, I think he's got a lot of detractors. People get on his back unfairly at times because he has this way with his body language of looking as if he's kind of not interested occasionally.
Right.
I don't think for a minute that that's actually true.
Yeah.
But certainly when you look at him, you can kind of see why people get annoyed. But also because people can see that he's clearly got the ability. He's got the talent.
Yes.
And again, last month against some of the weaker sides, against Leeds and Watford particularly, he was superb.
Didn't he score? Did he score, Steve?
No, I don't think he did. No.
Okay. I thought he scored. Maybe not.
unless I'm losing my mind. No, I don't think so. But no, he's been excellent for most of this season without quite sort of delivering the end product. But certainly against Watford, he was getting down the flanks and putting crosses in. And the problem was that Armstrong and Adams were both missing a hatful of chances in that game. Otherwise, he could easily have had 4 or 5 assists.
Oh God!
But then he's missed the last couple of games with because he tested positive for COVID.
Oh right! Is he back for this one? Do you think against Norwich?
I believe so. Yeah, I would assume he's getting available now. I don't think he was symptomatic or anything. He just tested positive, so he was kind of forced into isolation for a bit.
I always worry about a former player returning. I'm sure you feel the same, Steve. I'm always like, oh God, he's going to do some damage. And of course, as well, Armstrong is a name to be mentioned, which I'm sure will be spoken about by lots of Norwich fans, because of course we were touted with a move with him at the same time as you, along with Josh King, who we decided to not shell out for. So well done, and I'm very jealous that you've got him in your ranks. Steve, I want to zoom out now. Before we get into the crux of this conversation, start talking about the game, the score prediction, etc. I want to zoom out on Southampton as a football club, because as we spoke about off air, so to speak, before we joined, you were only a year behind us, and we both sort of did that League One to Premier League ascendancy very quickly. How have you survived in the Premier League for the time that you have? Has it been down to just the fact that you've got so much more money than Norwich, so you can just continuously put more cash into transfers, or is it something different than that?
I don't think it's been about cash per se. I think we spent a little bit in League One. So I mean, the squad we had in League One didn't really change an awful lot. once we got up into the Championship, it was already good enough to go in that
Really
league with the likes of, I mean, Lambert we paid $1 million for, Font we paid $1 million for, and we already had Schneiderlin, Lallana,
what a team, by the way,
and players like that on the books. David Connolly as well was a good one at that level, and so they were all kind of ready made to start progressing, having kind of been given a baptism of fire in our relegation season when basically we were just playing the kids because we didn't have any money to buy anybody proper. But then haven't got into the Premier League. I think a lot of it has been combination of smart recruitment and smart sales.
Okay.
So we've always, I mean, I don't know if you remember when Ronald Koeman got the job after Pochettino left. That was the summer where we had that massive big sale of basically everybody.
Yeah.
Lambert, Lallana, Lovren, Shaw.
Did Mane go that year or not?
No, Mane arrived that summer.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
So we had the big clear out of the old guard.
Yeah.
Brought in a load of money and replaced them with sort of new players, largely from the continent, but for about half the price, if not less. So that was when we then got Graziano Pella, Dusan Tadic, Sadio Mane. Oh God, who else?
You did well.
Virgil van Dijk, another one. And we had Toby Alderweireld on loan from Atletico Madrid for a season as well, which cost us absolutely nothing.
So is it just a masterclass in recruitment then, Steve? Because as you've said, like I know you still in comparison to Norwich, you still have so much more money. But I would agree with your point that there wasn't tons of money chucked at these players. That it was probably a fair amount of money at that time. So are you just, because I feel like Southampton were maybe the first football club I can remember doing what I would call smart recruitment and buying those players in from those untapped countries, leagues, bringing them in, developing them, and then obviously seeing them rise and selling them for a high profit. I would argue that you guys were the trailblazers for that sort of for that tactic within the football world. Now, would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think we were for probably a period of 2 to 3 years, we were probably ahead of the curve with everybody else in terms of recruitment analysis, using statistics, having countless analysts poring over player data. I mean, almost as if like everybody was just sat in a dark room playing Football Manager constantly, finding all the players with the best sort of potential ratings. But I mean, other clubs have kind of been in that situation before. Don't forget, mid-90s Arsenal were the prime ones for doing that. Basically, just bought in a load of cheap players in from France because Arsene Wenger knew the market.
Oh, that's true.
He knew who he could get for a cheap price, and they went a whole season unbeaten, and were an absolutely brilliant team. More recently, I mean, even Newcastle did it. And even under Mike Ashley, they did it for a year or two when Pardew was there, when they came fifth. And again, using the French market, they had it was Graham Carr, wasn't it, the chief scout, who had a really good knowledge of the French market at the time, and they brought in loads of great players. Johan Cabaye, oh God, who else?
Cisse, and there was a few, wasn't there? Do you know what, Steve, as well? And it's almost annoying me that it's taken Norwich so long to get to the point where we've started recruiting in a smart manner. But that's a whole other conversation.
It does take somebody within the club to kind of draw a line and say, look, this is the way we're going to do it now, because this is nonsense that we're doing it on gut feel, which is always the way historically clubs have always done it.
It's crazy.
They see a guy who scores a hat-trick against them in a cup game for a lower league team, think, right, we're going to spend millions of pounds on that guy.
Harry Redknapp sort of style, isn't it?
Oh God, yeah, and managers who are on the merry-go-round keep signing the same players. Like, I mean, I'm expecting Nico Cranshaw to pop up wherever Redknapp takes a job next. It's just with the brown envelopes that come with it.
I think he's done now, Steve. I think he's done.
I really hope so.
Steve, I want to quiz you, not aggressively, but I want to ask you politely what your brutal opinion is on Norwich City this season. Do you think we will survive?
If you'd asked me 2 weeks ago, I'd have said no, not a chance.
Right.
The new manager kind of adds that little bit of unknown to it.
Okay.
Because I mean, you do get these occasional scenarios where a new manager comes in and the squad just fits perfectly with the style that he wants to play, and the players just get it. That might happen, it might not. The problem I think Norwich have is that, I mean, I like the fact that you seem to kind of own the strategy of going up. If you stay up, then great. If you don't, then it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And you don't have to rip everything up and start again like a lot of clubs do.
Yeah.
I think that's a very sensible way of operating, which means that the club isn't going to be put in jeopardy just by getting relegated after one season. And I thought this year might be the year where you kind of looked a little bit more kind of at home in the top flight. But then, of course, you had this agreement with Buendia that if he gave you a year in the Championship, you'd let him go. And unfortunately, he's been the key player. Both, I mean, he scored a lot and created so much. And you can't, even with that. I mean, Norwich ain't going to be spending 40 million quid on a single player, not in a month of Sundays.
No.
So you're already now then trying to reorganize the setup of the team in order to fit all of the different attributes that you've lost with the sale of one player. And we kind of had similar with someone like Mane, for example. We bought Redmond as a sort of direct replacement, really. But he was never going to be a direct replacement. Yeah, he might give you the pace.
Yeah.
But he doesn't give you the sort of the power in front of goal.
Yeah.
Doesn't give you I call it kind of the game intelligence.
Yeah.
No, just knowing what's around you without even having to look. It's a very rare commodity that, and Mane had it. And that's always the problem for clubs trying to sort of move on up, is that you can't, within the budgets that you've got, it's very difficult to find better than what you've already got. It's very difficult to kind of punch upwards in that regard.
Believe me, we know, Steve. I ask this question to everyone that comes on the Oppo preview, Steve. If you had to sign one Norwich player for Southampton right now, who would it be and why?
Well, I think last time you were in the Premier League, I would have said Max Aarons.
Okay, yeah.
But now we've got two ridiculously good right backs, so we don't need him anymore.
Okay.
So, I mean, I know he's not been in the team at all, has he? But Todd Cantwell was the one that kind of stuck out a little bit a couple of years ago, and then just seems to have disappeared off the face of the earth. I don't know what the deal is there. Did he fall out with Farke?
Mate, we're clueless to it as well. We just really hope that Dean Smith has got his head screwed on and gets him back in that team. There was obviously a fallout between Todd and Farke, and I'm smiling and I'm nodding and I'm laughing, Steve, because honestly, the amount of people that come on here and say Todd Cantwell every single time, and for some reason, it's just a frustration for me that it was that talent was never utilised this season under Daniel Farke. If not, I feel that we would have been in a better position. Steve, let's get to crunch time now. I don't know if you want to factor in the 3-0 away win for you last time. It was behind closed doors, though. Head to head over the years, if you want to factor this in, we've won 40 games, you've won 51, and we've drawn 38 times. So no more messing around.
It's weird. I've never really associated us sort of playing you that often.
Oh, really? Oh, I would say we did for a number of years.
Because we quite often kind of swap positions. Even.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly in recent years. I guess these records go back to, I don't know, 1702 or something ridiculous like that. So what's your head saying score prediction wise, Steve? What's your heart saying?
I think ultimately, while sort of, I mean, there's obviously the new manager bounce stuff, and obviously you got to win in your last game. But I still think we should be winning. Looking at Norwich's team on paper, it doesn't look like a team that should be challenging. But ultimately, the job of a good manager is to make a team better than the sum of its parts. So it's still one of those where you're kind of still not quite sure. I still think we will win,
Okay.
but I don't think it's necessarily going to be as comfortable as it would have been if you'd asked me 2 weeks ago.
So what's your head saying? What's your heart saying? I need an exact score prediction, Steve.
Head is saying 1-0
to Southampton.
Yeah, heart is probably slightly more optimistic, so 3-0.
3-0. Oh no, please! I really, really do not hope that happens. Oh, that would be really bad for us. My head is saying it's going to be 1-1. It's going to be a really tight cage affair. I think we'll have to score first to realise that score. But my heart, Steve, is actually saying your score the other way around. My heart is saying 3-0 Norwich. I just think this new manager bounce, putting in new players that could just go for it, and I think we might shell shock Southampton. There you go. Clip it up. Steve, thank you. I like the fact you're laughing already, you son. Steve, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights into Southampton today. I really appreciate it, mate.
Yeah, no worries.
And thank you so much to everyone that's watched this episode of the TNC Opposition Preview. If you've enjoyed this video, do give it a thumbs up on YouTube. Get involved in the conversation as well. Drop a comment down below. Let us know. I know Steve's on Twitter. Total Saints Podcast is on Twitter. Go and follow those guys and get involved in the conversation. We are at Talk Norwich City. Fingers crossed the next time I speak to you, lovely lot, will be after we get 2 wins in a row. We couldn't, could we? Oh, my voices.